And what you'll find too is that a lot of the contracts the government puts out are specifically directed or set aside to small businesses.
Okay.
And those are the ones that you want to focus on because they're the ones that really help limit the competition out there to give you a little bit further help in winning work.
Welcome to Build Your Best Business. I'm your host, Eric Holtzclaw. Build Your Best Business focuses on the entrepreneurial journey. What does it take to successfully start, manage, grow, and eventually exit a business? Today, I am joined by Edward DeVilliers. He is the founder of DeViltech, and we're going to talk a little bit about an area that doesn't often get focused on as much, which is working with the government. So, Ed, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about DeViltech. What is it that you guys do at DeViltech?
Well, we're a small system engineering software development firm. It's built from my experience working both in the government as a former Marine, getting into the acquisition community in the Marine Corps specifically, and then following on and basically making a company to do the things that I did both as a government contractor and as a civil servant.
Okay. All right. So you took what you did like in your prior career and turned it into a business.
Yeah. So it's an interesting background. I had an operational career as an artillery officer, which some people will probably be surprised. It's actually a very technical IT oriented job in the Marine Corps because there's a lot of digital communications, digital systems involved. And I went to Marine Corps Systems Command as a payback for getting my computer science degree at the Naval Postgraduate School. So that kind of led to dealing with all sorts of military systems, be it communications, networking, and very much software intensive system software development. So that's what I kind of rolled into as the focus for DeVilliers Technology Solutions.
So tell me, so I went to school for computer science and I went to a military college to get my computer science degree, but never really related the whole, you said artillery? Was that what you were in?
Yes.
Yeah, artillery to that as an area. Maybe because I ended up never really programming a computer. Just knew how to talk to people who did, right? But that's an interesting, I wouldn't translate the two together, like that one, it would be related to the other. So give me an example of how those two map.
Well, like one of my key jobs in artillery was as a fire direction officer. To do that, you're both using digital systems that are computing, what the direction needs to be for the guns, the amount of powder, taking into account wind, weather, movement of the earth. So you're shooting at something 10 miles away. So the actual movement of the earth has to be accounted for.
Oh, wow.
So you learn how to do this both manually, and then you have your digital systems doing it. And as you work in the profession, you get asked to go, hey, if we were going to build a new system, what does it need to do? So I got asked that several times just being in the Fleet Marine Force. And it's something I really had to delve into when I was in acquisition, because then you're actually working with contractors to build the system. So from a military career aspect, you get to hit a lot of those digital systems that help you do your job.
Okay, so an acquisition, when you say that, you mean, is that like procurement? Were you working to pick vendors? Or
yes, procurement and development, right? So an acquisition command in the military and the federal government is about buying things, which either you're building it yourself with contractor help. So that's the development side, or you have contractors. That's been mainly my point of supporting the government side and working with developers.
Okay.
So there's a service side and there's a development side, and I've been on both.
And so then I've talked with a lot of people who said, like, how long were you in the military?
I was in for 11 years.
11 years.
So
okay.
I had to make my decision. It was a personal decision, and basically kind of surrounded the idea of do you stay in for 20 or do you start doing other things? And for me, it was engineering and eventually being an entrepreneur.
Okay. All right. So yeah, because I've talked to a lot of people who get to the end of that 20-year retirement and then they decide that, they're going to have like a second career, right? Which is kind
Yes.
of something you can do. But you left a little bit before the kind of official retirement would typically happen.
Right. Yeah. Because of my background, I mean, especially artillery, I spent most of my time as a captain and major, either at school or in acquisition command, right, procurement. Did not bode well in terms of getting, higher level command positions. So it was one of those made sense to do a career transition earlier.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so then deciding to make that career transition, so you started DeVille Tech. Is that true? Was that like the first thing you did, or did you do something
Well, what
else?
I did was actually, and this is one of the things I would recommend to other people, is that if you have the contacts and the background knowledge, go earlier rather than later.
Okay.
I basically waited about close to 10 years after I left the Marine Corps to start Devil Tech. And that was time that I could have spent building the business. But it was all right because I spent that time really learning the business from a lot of different angles, both from the government, being a civil servant, being the lead engineer for ground C2 systems in the Marine Corps, as well as being part of a FFRDC, Federally Funded Research and Development Corporation. That was MITRE.
Yeah.
And being part of, commercial contractors. So I was in Northrop Grumman for several years. So that was good for me because it gave me, good foundation for how different parts of the government, being the government itself, military, or being part of a contractor, how they all see each other, how they interact. That was a great foundation to then be able to start my business.
Okay. So a lot of companies that I talk with that may only be in the commercial space today, the government seems like maybe a holy grail, like it's a place that they can go and sign some contracts, and they sound like they might be large contracts, but approaching the government compared to going after maybe even a Fortune 500 or a Global 2000 company, there's a very different approach to that. So if you were sitting with someone and they said, yeah, I've got this great commercial business, I'd like to sign some government contracts, what's some advice you would give them around how to get started?
If they can get in as a subcontractor to a current federal contract, that would be probably the best in terms of understanding everything they need to do. Because I've given advice to other people, and there's a lot of infrastructure you need to put in place in order to work with the government. There's a whole idea of personal security clearances and facility clearances that you need to worry about. There's obviously those things that are a little bit harder to deal with, like accounting. Dealing with government contracts, you need to get an accountant that understands what the government's looking to see in terms of your chart of accounts and how you set that up. The business insurance is definitely something that's always required. Just dealing with the federal acquisition regulation. So the other main thing I learned was get smart early in a lot of these areas. So go to like your small business administration office, because they'll normally have classes that deal with these topics, and they're really important to deal with, because there's a lot of gotchas that are involved in contracting and working with the federal government.
And so then I guess I'm surprised, because I've heard, Small Business Association or administration a lot on the show, where people have come through and they said, oh yeah, that was really key to me getting my business off the ground. But I think about them more in the commercial space. So I didn't realize that they would also work with you to determine how to get into the government and do a government contract.
It's interesting. I'm trying to get more into the commercial space, but I'm focused on right now, because of my background, the federal side, especially in DoD. It's a different environment. I think you get used to all the rigor that's needed on the federal side. And, sometimes I feel, talking to other people, you may not need that fully on the commercial side. And things like marketing are different, because you can do direct sales on the commercial side. You don't go through a huge contracting process that for the federal government can literally take you a year or more.
Oh, wow.
So that's the other thing, is that to get business in the federal government, normally you have to be planning for months, if not years, for what's coming out, and kind of position yourself, market directly to key government people, the ones who are going to be the decision makers, because they don't make it on their own. They have a whole process, a whole group of people that are involved to lead to a decision.
Okay, well,
so there's a lot more prep a lot of times for the government.
Okay, well, we're going to go to commercial break, and when we get back, I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like. Like, how do I find out who a prime might be? I think you call it's like a prime contractor.
Yes.
What kind of things are coming across? How do I know to bid on them? Because typically in the commercial space, that's a little different. Like you've got a salesperson out, or if somebody reaches out to you and says, I have a need. And I think it may be different in the government space. So when we get back, let's talk about what that looks like. So you're listening to Build Your Best Business. I'm talking today with Edward DeVilliers. He's with DeVilTech, and we're talking about what it takes to break into government contracting from someone who's done that his entire career. So we'll be back in just a minute.
Thank you.
DeVilTech is a systems engineering and software development company established in 2012. Based in Stafford, Virginia, we provide engineering services, consulting, and product development to our customers.
Welcome back. You're listening to Build Your Best Business. I'm joined today by Ed DeVilliers. He's with DeVilTech, and his company does commercial work, but knows a lot about the government space, which is often the reverse. Most of the time, people do a lot of commercial work and want to learn more about how to get into the government. So that's kind of what we're focused on. So first, in the last segment, you were talking about the idea of finding, I think you said a prime and being kind of a subcontractor to that prime. So how would I know as a commercial business that there's a prime? How would I know that they would even need my services? Like, talk to me a little bit about how that looks and works.
Sure. So there are a lot of resources out there to find out what are the current contracts or what's coming up. So FedBizOps, it's a big resource to be able to go to. There's also all the federal government organizations have small business offices. So I routinely go and try to visit them, and they will give you forecasts about what's coming up, which will include who are the current contract holders. So there's a lot of information you'll get from the government themselves to get that. That is a great start. The other thing that I do is I join professional organizations. And for instance, I went to Marine Corps Association C4 award dinner last night. Not only was I seated next to a couple of 3-star generals and stuff, you have all these different industry representatives there, right? So you get to see your General Dynamics, your Northrop Grumman's, Raytheon's, as well as your smaller companies. And they're all there. And it's just a great way to network in. Which is really important if you want to start getting business, because at the end of the day, you want to not only know who the primes are, you need to start getting relationships with them.
Yeah.
Right. That's how you get onto a team that goes and proposes something. So you need to be able to start, working with them, making them understand what your value proposition is, and the government helps you to get the primes to take in subcontractors, because normally large companies have a subcontracting requirement. They need to put some percentage of their work.
Interesting. So that is a desired thing, because on the commercial side, it can be sometimes a detriment, right? So if you're not going to provide everything internally, they want to know it. They may write it into the agreement that you can't. But it sounds like on the government side, that may not be the case. Like, they do want you to bring in some subcontractors for some reasons.
Yes, that is definitely usually a requirement, some percentage of your work. And what you'll find too is that a lot of the contracts the government puts out are specifically directed or set aside to small businesses.
Okay.
And those are the ones that you want to focus on, because they're the ones that really help limit the competition out there to give you a little bit further help in winning work. And then there are things that I just gotten, like the SBA, Small Business Administration 8A certification, or Department of Veterans Affairs Service Disabled, Veteran-Owned Small Business Certification. Those are different classifications that the government will set aside work just for those companies.
Interesting. Okay.
And again, that gives you a leg up, and that needs to be part of your overall plan. If you fit into some of those, see how you get it. It's time well worth spent, because I'm getting opportunities now as an 8A company that I never would have gotten before, and the primes want to go after associating with you because now you're a path for them to get some work that they have no ability going after themselves.
Okay, that makes sense. It sounds like it's a long process. I mean, in the commercial space, it can be, you meet somebody and it may take a year or two to sign them just because of where they are. They're not ready, but you could also meet somebody and sign a contract in just a couple of days, right? Like it's like, oh, we have a need and we're ready to get started and, let's get going. But it sounds like that's not the case on the government side.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it both ways. I mean, a lot of things I've seen is, you have someone on the inside. I was to some extent on the inside. You have people in the government who really like your work. And for me, my first contract was set up before I even left my employer.
Oh, wow.
Now, obviously, I left, and then I still had to wait about 5 months to get the contract just because things go so much slower, and you have to be ready for that.
Yeah.
And the temptation of going back in as an employee of some other company, which I really don't recommend. If you're going to be a business owner, be an entrepreneur, and don't try to juggle both.
Yeah.
Because you get into conflicts of interest and issues with your current employer that you just don't want to deal with.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like waiting to get started, and then my experience in the government space, because we did a bunch of projects that would be, my companies have almost always been built for efficiency, right? So like do this really quickly, and we would be asked to do something that would then on the government side take a lot longer. So being able to and I always had to name resources. So like they wanted a specific person who was doing the work, which is also an interesting thing on the government side.
Yeah, it really depends. There are so many different things a government agency may want from a contract, but if you're going through, let's say, an RFP, request for proposal process, because it is so long for the government, they want someone that they feel is going to be there for the long haul.
Yeah.
So these contracts are going to be 4 or 5 years long. So it's more about being able to run the long game than be able to do something quick and go 3 months in and out. Government contracting, to some extent, is not really made well for those short contracts. They want longer contracts.
Got it.
Unless they're doing pure procurement, right? Unless they're saying, hey, we want you to buy us certain hardware and install it. Those can be short. But for the most part, especially services, you want to be able to show that you have the ability to manage a good-sized team and to continue supporting them for years. So they're going to want to make sure, do you have the past performance? Do you have the infrastructure? Do you have the accounting system? They're going to want to look at all that to get a sense of it's low risk to go to you,
okay.
Right? I think that's the key lesson is present yourself as a low risk alternative, because a lot of people in government are risk averse.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's why they work for the government. That's why, risk aversion is probably very, very high on their list. So future for both the business and even working with the government, do you see big changes? Do you think the way it's been is the way it will always be? So what do you, if you looked into your crystal ball and said, this is what I think is going to happen next, both maybe for working with the government and then for your company?
Well, in my area, which is more kind of software development and program development, I see things rising. I mean, normally in the DoD budget, it's either are you spending money on operations, aka wars, or are you spending money on acquisition, aka building new systems?
Right.
And I think we're finally, the pendulum's going back to where it's about building systems, doing your R&D, stepping into new technology. Cyber defense and anything with cyber operations is a huge area, as well as command and control, which is the business I'm in. I see those doing a lot of new business in the coming years, just because, they spent so much time kind of maintaining current systems, and now's the time to go from maintenance to new development.
Very nice. And then for your business?
We're actually in product development right now. So we're working with a small startup, doing our own command and control system that I'm calling Licorum. I think there's a lot of key target audiences for that. And for my business model, I do services work, right? Supporting government agencies in their procurement processes. I use the money from there to help fund my product development. So I continue that working, and with our new certifications with 8A and Service Disabled BOSB, we're going after a lot of new contracts, and we're starting to be successful in getting them. So we're going to continue that in the future.
Well, very nice. Well, thanks so much for joining me to talk about this. I mean, this is like I said, a lot of categories. People are either commercial or government typically, or maybe nonprofit. Like those are three kind of very distinct ways of going after and looking at business, and they run and talk differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I learned some things, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So you've been listening to Build Your Best Business. I've been talking today with Edward DeVilliers. He's with DeVille Tech. You can find information on his company and him on the show notes and also across social media. Now, what are you going to do to build your best business?